Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Steve Poisner. I'm a senior VP at Qualcomm. And with my team and I, we've just launched Qualcomm's newest division called Qualcomm Education. And the purpose and mission of Qualcomm Education is to help bring mobile technology to the classroom. We think there's a direct correlation between student engagement and outcomes in the classroom. And we think mobile technology could be a fantastic tool to really help improve student engagement. In fact, Qualcomm has spent many years now and many millions of dollars measuring the direct impact, and we know that students already have this intimate relationship with their mobile device, and incorporating mobile technology into the curriculum can really have a big impact. Now, for me personally, I became very passionate about wanting to apply technology to the education space several years ago when I took a year out to be a volunteer school teacher at a school right just down the road here in East San Jose, Mount Pleasant High School, and I was a 12th grade teacher, and I saw firsthand how hard it is to be a teacher in a public school. I mean, it's really difficult. In East San Jose, Mount Pleasant High School. Yeah, about 40 miles down the road. That's where I live down there. And I got to tell you, this is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, was to be a teacher in a public school, and one of the most rewarding too. But what guides us at Qualcomm Education is focusing on how can we help the teacher better connect with the students. That's what we're up to at Qualcomm Education now. So we've built this mobile learning platform that helps facilitate this connection between students and each other and students and their instructors. And we're in the process, our engineering team, of opening up the technology with SDKs and with APIs, because one thing we know for sure, one size doesn't fit all. We need the help of developers to customize and tailor, to meet the needs in the classroom. So one thing that is going to be a challenge now as more apps get out into the education space is how do teachers and how do kids and how do parents, how do they pick, of all these thousands of apps out there, which ones really work? Well, that's the subject of this distinguished panel here this afternoon. The folks from Common Sense Education, it's one of the largest not-for-profit groups that focuses in on helping teachers and parents select the right kind of educational content and apps, for their kids and for the classroom. And we have 4 fantastic panelists here. They're all from the San Francisco area, so you might be able to connect with them after the panel here too. But let me just quickly introduce the folks. Shira Katz is a director at Common Sense Education, has a doctorate from the Harvard Graduate School of Education. Tanner Higgin is a senior manager, also has a PhD from the University of California, Riverside. Aaron O. Senior editor, also very distinguished background, degrees in English and a master's degree in instructional design. And then Jeff Knudsen. Did I get the last name right?
You did, yes.
Thank you. At least I got that was great. Anyways, Jeff has a master's degree in education from Lewis and Clark. So this panel, they're experts from the educational sector. They have feedback for developers on how to build a great mobile app for the education space. So take it away.
Thanks. I'll just stay here. Thank you so much, Steve and Susan. Thanks so much for inviting us here. Jared did a great job on AV back there. I think I want to start by giving you a little picture into education. I imagine many of you are familiar, and I actually want to poll you to see what you do. So we go to a conference called the International Society for Technology and Education, and this is what we get. So it's a pen. And I think we also got a lint brush last year. And then we come here, and we get this. And our mouths just dropped. So it was quite the red carpet rollout here, and we really appreciate you having us here. So Steve introduced us, and we basically run a site called Common Sense Graphite, and we do ratings and reviews of ed tech for teachers, and we do tech-rich lesson plans and professional development. I want to get a sense of who you are. So who here is a developer? Thank you. And who here is developing for the K through 12 space? Okay, and then how about higher ed? Okay, thank you. And then how about consumer space? Okay, got it. How about a few, since we're a small crowd, a few other people, I'm curious to know why you're here. Just raise your hand and let me know.
We develop, my team develops apps for Qualcomm employees.
Great.
For the corporate sector.
Great, so you have to think about their mindsets. Mm-hmm.
I have invented a new way to educate children.
Yes.
Using NFC technology, near field communication. I have patent on that, and I have prototypes on that. It uses proximity, which is near field communication, to start, initiate, or select instructional content.
Yes.
So when you touch something, it plays a video and things like that. I have got for children,
Yes.
Toddler from to 8th grade, something like that. I've got
Got it.
very beautiful products.
Fabulous. I think
Using
we'll want to
cell phone.
hear more about it, especially after we can connect.
Sure.
Great. So we are either former teachers or former teacher types who are invested in great pedagogy. And so, of course, we have to start with a quiz. So how many education apps do you think there are in the Google Play Store? So your choices are A, 20,000, 30,000, 50,000, or 70,000. This is just in the education category. So who thinks A? Okay. Who thinks B? C? And D. Okay, you're pretty well divided. So the answer is actually C, which is a heck of a lot of apps. And then you add in other digital content. You add in websites. You add in games. And you're up to probably 200,000. And this is of the ones that are pretty good and are already classified in education. And we see lots of products that have bells and whistles, but not necessarily a lot of depth, or are not engaging to kids. And then we see some that are not that inviting, let's say, but have really good substance. And it's hard to find one that has great substance and great design. So just to give you an example of some of the things we see, a teacher who is a high school teacher had a student who came up to her and said, I need an online calculator, Mrs. So-and-so. Can I use calculator.com? So the teacher said, yeah, that sounds sensible, right? So when she went to calculator.com, did she find a standard calculator? A fractions calculator? A love calculator? Or all of the above? Who thinks A? Who thinks B? Okay, some. Who thinks C? And who thinks D? Oh, I gave it away with my voice. So, all of the above is what they found. And of course, when she found that she and the lifelong love of her life, Paul, had a 45% compatibility. So this is what she's doing during the school day when her teacher really wanted her to be doing multiplication and learning about trigonometry. So I think the point is that there are all kinds of things. On the flip side, has anyone heard of DragonBox? Okay, so we have 2 people who've heard of it. It's quite amazing. Basically, it is an app for teaching about algebra, and you start with symbols. And over time, you start replacing them with numbers. So kids who are daunted by the idea of learning algebra start with these other symbol systems, and they work in numbers. So it's not so scary. And they learn about the concepts, the underlying concept. You have to balance equations and do the same thing to both sides. It's really quite ingenious, and yet only 2 people have heard of it, and I'm not surprised. They're in Norway, the developer's in Norway, and they don't have the word math in their title. So calculator.com, clearly a calculator, right? Clearly one that I would want to show my students. DragonBox you might not think to, and yet the stories that they have and the underlying sort of quality of them is very, very different for learning. I think overall we see thousands and thousands of things. Developers come to pitch us. We are scouring and doing research all the time, but it is really difficult to separate the wheat from the chaff. And I think what we've also noticed is that there are not a lot of companion materials. So you can make an app, you can make digital content, but what we're not seeing are tech-rich lesson plans to help teachers figure out how to implement those things in their classroom and give them blueprints for it. So I also want to sort of put you in the mindset of a teacher, whether you were teaching employees at Qualcomm or whether you're thinking about how to make better learning design apps. For any reason, it's good to get in the mindset of an educator, like Steve. So let's think about Philip. So Philip C., he teaches 6th grade English. He has a great profile picture, and he really identifies as a pioneer. He thinks, I'm cutting edge, I want new practices, I want new products, I want to be on the cutting edge. And I think he thinks in terms of his subject, he thinks in terms of his grade, and he thinks in terms of wanting new things. So he wants cutting edge products. He also knows that he has to teach to standards. Do people here know about the Common Core standards? Have you read anything about them? Okay. So there are many different opinions about the Common Core, but many teachers in many states have to really think about those standards that they have to teach to and think about the end goal of what they're trying to teach. And so he's really thinking about how to meet those in inventive ways. The next person is someone like Rochelle. She is one of our certified teachers, which means she's like an Uber user teacher for us. We love Rochelle. And she is the go-to for her school, really. So she has to integrate technology in many different subjects. So she's working with the English teacher, with the science teacher, with the math teacher, with all the different content teachers, and she has to pick out good quality for them, and her reputation is on the line. Because if she picks out something bad for them or something that they don't like or doesn't go with what they're trying to teach, they will not trust her again. So she's really this arbiter of quality. She also has to do professional development for them, so she has to help them think about their teaching practice and good models for implementing technology in the classroom. And then finally, you have Beatrice. She's from Houston, and of course she's at the district level. So she, in her role, she has to approve a lot of apps. Do they have good privacy policies? Do they have shown efficacy studies? Can I justify using this with my superintendent? And of course, will it help kids learn, which is very, very important for someone like Beatrice. So she's interested in best practices and just understanding sort of teaching as an art form and trying to create a model that's systematic in her district to teach. Okay, I'm going to pass on to Tanner.
So subject area teachers like Philip are often looking in two different directions. One would be a subject-specific tool that teaches something that they need, some kind of outcome in the classroom. The other one would be a content-agnostic tool that can be used in a lot of different situations and adapted to different outcomes. And we're trying to cover both of these in equal measure to fulfill those two needs of teachers.
So I think one thing a developer will want to ask is not just, is it for reading or is it for writing, but is it for a sub-subject or a sub-skill? So I think if you talk to an English teacher, okay, reading, that's a little opaque. They want to know specifically, is it for teaching phonics? Is it for teaching letter recognition? Is it for teaching vocabulary? And for writing, are we trying to teach kids about tone or structure or fluency? So I think it's probably too broad to think about science, think about biology, think about fractions. I think that's where we're seeing some of the best stuff is as you drill down into the sub-subjects. Okay, and also to what end? So I talked a little bit about these standards. So in so many states, teachers have to really teach to these standards. These are, in the case of the Common Core, they're national standards. It doesn't mean they've been adopted by every state. States like Texas, not surprisingly, they sort of shun the Common Core. They're doing their own thing. But there are many states that actually are teaching the Common Core standards. And they're just a set of kind of end goals or objectives in ELA and math right now that teachers have to meet. And so when you're designing, think about those end goals. A teacher wants to be able to say, I taught X objective using X tool, and I had these outcomes. So it's really important to put yourself in the mindset of a teacher in that sense. The next generation science standards just came out. They're actually really interesting standards, and the states are starting to adopt them. So you'll see more of that. But if you're inventing a science app or anything in the STEM realm, so science, technology, engineering, and math, you want to think about STEM standards, particularly for science. I won't go into others, but I think it's just important to know that if you're designing, think about standards. Okay, and you also want to think, of course, about, is it any good? The overall quality, the look and the feel, there are all kinds of ways to do this. On Common Sense Graphite, what we have sort of an expert editorial group that puts everything through a common rubric, which we'll hear about a little bit later, but we also have the crowd. And so as you well know, you want to think about sort of what an expert in the field might think and what sort of new teachers who haven't been exposed to things might think.
So what does good for learning mean? This is kind of the heart of this presentation and what we do at Common Sense Graphite. We've thought a lot about this, and we've developed a 15-item rubric to evaluate every piece of technology. It's kind of our secret sauce. We keep it a little bit secret, give a little bit away. We'll give a little bit more away in this presentation. One of the big things for us, though, is making a big shift in education, away from the chocolate-covered or cheese-covered broccoli model that a lot of you are probably familiar with. The idea that learning itself isn't fun, so we've got to cover it up with a lot of bells and whistles, with something gamey to make it more palatable. Well, what if broccoli is pretty cool on its own? That's kind of what we're trying to think through, is what is great about learning? Can't learning itself be a transformative, incredible thing? And how do we pull out that essence of learning and make great products that focus in on those key qualities of learning? So I like to think of it separately with a different metaphor as when you're designing educational technology, you're kind of a sushi chef, looking at each ingredient, looking at those elements of learning and thinking about what makes that thing awesome, and then building tools around that inherent awesomeness of the learning. So to get a little bit deeper into our rubric about what these awesome things about learning are, we're trying to push towards developing conceptual understanding. We see a lot of not so great educational products that are about instructive teaching. Here's some content, let's shove it down students' throats. But we want to, when we're focusing on the albacore tuna of learning, we want to extract what's tasty about it, and those things are usually concepts and skills, and we want to build around those types of things as opposed to just the pure content. We want to think about how we create models and simulations, how we build metaphors, give students meaty things to unpack rather than shoving content down their throats. We also look for products that build critical skills, ways of thinking against things or with things, really understanding things at their core. Something like Mozilla's Thimble and all of Mozilla's products are really great at this. For example, Thimble takes a website and allows students to see what's underneath it and modify it in real time. It's building skills rather than building skills through the practice and thinking of it rather than through rote memorization of code. We're also looking for stuff that's relevant to students, that connects with their lives, that feels authentic. Something like Road Trip Nation, we feel connects really well with students because you have a group of students themselves or former students traveling around the country, meeting with people, learning about what real life is like. We're also looking for things that are challenging. Kids will surprise you with their grit and ingenuity when given difficult problems to solve and not told how to do things. Minecraft, a tool that wasn't made for learning, ends up scoring a 5 on our website for learning because it doesn't handhold. It gives students a world and tools to explore with, and they create their own problems to solve. It leaves it totally up to them to build skills, new ways of thinking, and then it becomes a great vessel for a teacher to say, all right, let's get some content in there and let students play around with it and explore. So in essence, we're looking for learning that is integral, what we call baked in. It's not added on top of something. You see a lot of these old products, especially from the 90s, that where there's a racing game and you race around on the track and you go to the number that solves an equation or something. But it's thinking about it backwards. Think about the race car itself. What would that teach? What are the inherent concepts to racing, velocity and speed, and build from there so that the context in which someone's learning is authentic to them? Another really important part about what we're doing at Common Sense Graphite, what we consider, is about support for teachers and students. So not only is the learning solid, does it have the great content, but are both teachers and students supported in that learning? Does it cut across a lot of different learning styles? Does it have things for teachers to assess and look at progress? Are people supported in their use of these tools? That's not to say some of these things that are kind of the chocolate-covered broccoli approach or maybe a more traditional model are bad. Those things are good too in a measured way, in their own way. Things like quiz and flashcard apps, we score pretty well, but we also have this perspective that education can be better and do more.
And so let's not forget about the district level people. We were talking about Beatrice earlier, and some things that she's going to be most concerned with are higher level concerns like privacy, efficacy. So she wants to see that there's a privacy policy up front, that everything is clear, that she can see what kind of information is being gathered about students, how it's being used. She wants to know that FERPA and COPPA are being followed. And as well, the efficacy research, that's going to make apps much more attractive to her if she knows that there's research proving that the app has benefits for learning, whether that's formative testing with your beta that you've sent out with teachers to improve the product, or summative testing that you've done, or third-party research that you've had conducted. So you may be wondering, is this worth it? There's a lot to think about. We did send out a survey. We had a survey commissioned by Harris Interactive to get a feel for the market and what teachers are thinking and what they're doing. We found that 89% of teachers believe EdTech can improve student outcomes. However, only 18% of teachers are using EdTech at least once a week. We also know that more than half of them are researching products for more than an hour each week. It's a lot of time spent looking for products. And nearly 3/4 of them are hungry for recommendations. They want help figuring out what's good. And this is why we made Graphite, to help teachers with this. And I believe there's a video.
Oh, no.
It didn't work?
It didn't work.
Excuse me. No video. But this is our product. This is Graphite that we have where our ratings and reviews are for teachers. I'll let you do these.
So here's an example of a few bits from the review page, and the key information here is we try to give teachers, because the biggest thing for them is time, they want to find great products fast. We try to give them a quick snapshot at the top with a headline, a rating, and then we break that rating down across 3 dimensions connected to our rubric, which you can see there: engagement, pedagogy, and support. And if you look at the full review page, it gets more in depth from there. We really dig deep on a level you're not seeing anywhere else into these products. We spend a lot of time with them. We align it to a bunch of different subjects and skills. We value both of those equally, so something like ELA is just as valuable to us as social and emotional learning or critical thinking. We look into, is it good for learning, and how teachers might be able to use it in the classroom. We're trying to give them ideas for implementation. And yeah, I think that covers it. Is there anything else you wanted to add about that?
No, I think that's good.
Okay. Another big thing that we're finding a lot of excitement around is something we're calling app flows, name possibly changing soon, which is tech-rich lesson plans where people find the products on the site and then through some scaffolding we offer, but also open to their own interpretation, they can slot those products into a full lesson. And the idea here is to help teachers not only find products, but then share ideas for how to use those products in conversation and to move through technology. Because we're finding that not only is it tough to find technology, it's tough to even figure out exactly how you implement it into a classroom. That's often the biggest pain point for teachers.
Now just a little bit about what we are seeing in the education marketplace. So let's say one of these is Android and one is iOS. Not saying who's who, just saying. We have noticed that each has its own strengths. So for Android, we're finding that the devices are much more accessible for schools. The price point is lower. Android developers are really getting out there into schools. They're trying to figure out how to meet the market's needs there. The downside, the app content is variable, the quality. There are so many entry points into creating Android apps that we just get such a wide range of quality. With iOS, generally stronger content as far as quality goes, but as we know, the price point is really high. It makes it much more difficult for educators to get their hands on iOS products. And it makes it more likely that Android is the way that schools are going. We also have noticed in our time looking at all of the apps that we do that there are some gaps. So definitely some content areas that are more difficult possibly to develop high quality learning tools for. So just an example, social studies. If you think about social studies as this traditional textbook, fixed series of events that kids have to memorize, you're going to end up with an app that's like a textbook. And we get a lot of that. Text heavy, just really non-interactive apps for social studies. But some people are finding ways to really make engaging content for social studies. It's just not there yet. And we're seeing the same across some of these other content areas, as well as these different age groups, not as much out there for them, especially also English learners. There's a lot of need for apps in schools to help English learners. Okay.
All right, so I'm going to go over 12 tips that we would say would help make your beta product better. And these go into a little bit more detail about all of the things that we're looking for in a quality education app. But I'm going to blast through them somewhat quickly. So the first one...
A little time, Jeff.
We have a little time?
Yeah.
Okay.
5 minutes.
The first one I would say is think like a teacher. You really need to think about teachers' practical concerns in the classroom. Think about time. How much time do they have in the classroom? Think about funding. Think about the classroom logistics. Managing tech. A teacher is in a classroom managing a piece of technology while also monitoring 35 energetic, sometimes crazy children and teenagers. And they have to do this all at the same time, so think about their needs. Number 2, make products that stress experiential and constructivist learning models. Give kids and teachers experiences. Experiences they can get immersed in. Help kids build a new understanding and also help them reflect on that experience. Number 3, respond to students with constructive feedback, advice, and helpful hints. Feedback and guidance should make kids want to keep learning. It shouldn't make kids want to stop learning. Support kids' ability to find the answers for themselves. I like to say don't just give, but guide. Guide kids toward the answers. Offer the right amount. Too little feedback can confuse, and too much can muddle the experience. Number 4, give teachers clear, actionable data. A dashboard for teachers is key. Give teachers a special place just for them that's separate from the student experience. but keep teachers' limited time in mind. In terms of data, present data in such a way that it gives a clear pathway towards students' performance. Towards increasing students' performance. Number 5, support a diverse range of learners. Ask yourself, will kids from different cultural or linguistic backgrounds have access to the learning content? Are there built-in tools to help struggling readers, English language learners, special ed students, or those with other learning differences? Number 6, cover enough content, but don't sacrifice depth. This is important. Depth is very, very important, and I know we've talked about this a lot today. A lot of the products that we see are really a mile wide and an inch deep. They may cover every single Common Core standard, but how deeply do they cover those standards? I would say don't be afraid to do one thing, but do it really well. Number 7, encourage collaborative and collective learning. Give kids opportunities to interact and learn from one another. They'll build a much greater understanding than when they learn alone. But something to keep in mind, along with this, number 8, balance privacy and safety with data for schools. Social learning is important, we know this. Actionable data for teachers is important, we know this too. But be cognizant and protective of kids' online privacy and safety. This is not just a concern for parents, it's a concern for district administrators and teachers as well. Number 9, meet kids right at their level. Meet different kids right at their level. Make sure that both the learning and the content and the design match the tool's target age group. Of course, a kindergarten product and an AP US History product would look very different. We know that. But as someone who taught high school, I taught 9th graders and 11th graders. I can tell you that there's a huge difference between the mindset and the way that a 9th grader learns and the way that an 11th grader learns. And that's only 2 years apart. And so you really have to be cognizant about your audience and be specific to them. Number 10, be sure to represent diversity without bias or stereotype. When kids use an app, ask yourself, do they see diversity in a way that helps them feel welcomed and empowered to learn? Think about how positive representations can empower all kids to reach their potential. Number 11, make it kid-friendly, but also make sure it's distraction-free. Ask yourself, are there advertisements or sales or subscription info that will distract them from their learning? Keep teachers' information separate from kids' information. Keep kids in the zone, really, is what you want to do. And last, it kind of goes without saying, but make it essential to learning. Do something that nobody else is doing. Look for one of those gaps in the market that other people just aren't tapping into. And there definitely are holes in the market. Find them. Teachers desperately want you to do this. They're looking for these products. They're looking for the apps that you're creating. Don't merely replace something that exists already, yet in a digital format, but create apps that take learning somewhere new. So with that, I'll just leave you with our email addresses. If you have something new that you're working on and you want to pitch it to us, go ahead and do that. We would love to hear about that. We can't always respond to everybody because we get so many queries from people, but we do love to hear from developers and to hear what you're doing and to see what you're working on. And for the rest of our time here, we are happy to take questions, if you have them. Yeah.
Yes.
Where are the gaps in the market? Where's the biggest area of need that you see?
Are you directing it to me or just the group? Or well, I would say one that came up earlier today that we were just talking about is, it's called PBL. How many people are familiar with that acronym, PBL, in education? No one. So that explains maybe why there's a gap there, but it's called project-based learning. And it's a style of teaching and learning that really puts learning in the hands of kids. And we were just commenting on the fact that we want to create a top picks list for project-based learning, but we don't have enough content there yet. We don't have enough apps to make a list. We have a couple. And the few that are there are actually really interesting and doing cool things. So that's one area. I think.
Give an example of project-based learning, Jeff.
Yeah, so that's a good question. Project-based learning is a little bit tricky to describe, but it might be, it involves a lot of input from students about what they're going to learn. So students have a really big say in what and how they're learning. And usually students might have a little bit of say in how they learn and very little say in what they learn. But in a project-based classroom, teachers might go to students and say, okay, what do you want to learn about as it fits into this framework of the standards or whatever? And they have students work together with each other and work together with the teacher to develop a curriculum, to develop a plan. It's much like, the software that we see for it that has come out is much like project management software, but it's for kids. And so you have kids kind of, in addition to learning whatever specific content they're learning in class, they're learning these management skills and these other skills that will help them in the future. And it's a really powerful way to learn. So a lot of schools are moving in that direction. Does that answer?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I would also add to that, Aaron had that slide with social studies, world history, geography, high school, that kind of thing. I would also add things that are that there's a lot of content for, like math, is often just not done inventively. So, we always refer to DragonBox as this weird outlier of this magic, brilliant game that really rethought how math can be taught conceptually, but it's just DragonBox. And I feel like there's this potential out there for a developer to sit in a room, stare at a wall with like a bottle of whiskey and come up with some awesome way to teach geometry or something that just hasn't happened yet, and I'm dying for it to happen because I'm one of those people that struggles with math but was so deeply connected with DragonBox. So even the things that are already being done, I think there's a lot of room to be done better.
Great question. Yes.
Yes, 2 weeks ago I had a meeting with a venture capitalist, and he liked, it was a group of people, and he liked the product very much. But he told me that education market is tough to penetrate, tough to enter. And I had different experience because I could convince 2 schools to use our product as a pilot program, and they are doing it, But is it right that education market is really difficult? Because he said that he worked for Leapfrog, and they failed to penetrate the education market, and he was one of the bosses at Leapfrog.
Yes.
So is it really?
That's interesting.
Because I am just beginning to enter into this.
Yeah, I think we're about to see hockey stick-like growth in the education market for digital stuff.
Yes.
I think historically, big developers, you get the Pearsons, you get the McGraw-Hills, they come in, they're these behemoths, right? And so everyone goes to them, and we are about to shake it up. I'm positive about it. So I think that there is lots of room for interesting digital content to make its way. But the difference is I think it's going to be a lot more ground up than top down. Historically, you have approvers at the district level, at the state level, who say, this is okay curriculum to use. Everyone uses it. Right now, teachers are saying, these are the objectives I have, and the district is saying, okay, we're kind of entering a new age. We're really trying to move the needle. And therefore, they're putting learning in the hands of kids, which means a lot of these modules and things that you're creating need to be much more flexible. We're used to this model where you have students, 24 to 40 students sitting in rows, and you have a teacher at the front of the room. That has not changed. It is changing right now. So I think, there are many ways in which the education market is hard, and part of it is because people haven't changed their mentalities yet. Usually education is like 10 years behind consumer in all kinds of ways. And right now, many schools don't even have tablets. They may have computer carts still, like one computer for 100 students or 4 computers for 100 students. And so I think the education market will catch up, and then there's going to be a ton of need. Right now, I think it's hard to make money as an app developer right now. It is. Question?
Yeah, is it possible to start in consumer and there move into education?
That's a really good question. I'll start, and other people should answer too. So we were actually just discussing this. We talk a lot, as you can tell. But the things that we have seen that have moved from consumer and education usually have more success than when we see from moving from education to consumer. We really could not think of examples of products that started in education. There's a more formal voice there. They're very specific things that teachers need to do, but there are places like Glass Lab in like Redwood City who are associated with EA, and like Minecraft, EDU. And what they're figuring out is if you take a great consumer game that has done really well, that kids already like, and then you add on an assessment engine, a teacher dashboard, other things, you know, it's a little weird to sort of retrofit things that way, but ultimately you're getting all the things you need in education, which is assessment and sort of a specific place for teachers to go, but with the engagement and already with the reputation of games like SimCity EDU too. So we're seeing more consumer games moving to education.
Yeah, I think if Glass Lab has said that they've got mixed feelings about the success of the retrofit of SimCity EDU, but we thought it was really great. But I think they, from a developer's angle, felt it was a little bit frustrating because there were a lot of things they wanted to do, a lot of learning outcomes to hit on, but they were stuck with this basic frame of SimCity. But it still scored well for us, and we found it a really, really good learning tool. So I do think there is potential, even though they had a little bit of frustration with that transition.
Other questions?
Any other questions? Okay. So what about the teacher angle? Talk to us about the stereotype that one of the inhibitors is teachers not wanting to embrace technology. What tools are there out there for teachers to start embracing these new apps?
Sure, I'll jump in. So I think, sadly, there is that stereotype. I'm a former teacher. Jeff's also a former teacher. That wasn't always our experience. So I feel like really there are a lot of, it's not that they don't want to embrace the technology. There are all kinds of barriers in schools that are keeping that technology out of their hands. I think the ways that the Android market is trying to get the price point down for teachers and for districts to adopt one-to-one more easily, I think that is helping tremendously. And I think just making the tools more discoverable, like what we're trying to do is to get them that information. Many of them, they're like, well, I have a tablet. Maybe they do have one-to-one, but what do I do with it? What do I put on it? Maybe they don't have enough support in their schools. So something like what we do, try and offer them ways of using the products. So for developers, when you have an app, have some lesson plans, have some guidance for teachers on what to do with it in their classroom, and even some alignment possibly to the standards, so they have a better idea and more to go on. They don't have any time, right? So the more you give them, the more readily they may adopt that app.
Yeah, I would add to that I think there is the stereotype out there that teachers are very tech averse, and I think it's just that, it's a stereotype. I think the evidence that I see that kind of goes against that idea that teachers really do want technology is if you look at how the more successful tech startups are selling to schools, it's not just top down and it's not just bottom up, it's both. They create a product, a pricing model that's free for teachers, to create a group of teachers that really like the product, and it's free, they can get at it very easily. And then they build in a district level integration from the top down. And then they charge the district to be able to look at all of that data. Because at the end of the day, the district administrators want data. And the teachers want to have that learning experience with the kids. And so they give the teachers the learning experience for free. They give, or they don't give, they sell the data to the school district from the top. And that's kind of the model that I've been seeing lately, and I think some of us have seen that as well.
We know that in education, really, I mean, iPad's kind of been the king of it. Android's coming up. What do you think the impact of Chromebooks? I mean, Chromebooks have really taken off in education, and now they're going to allow, you can put Android apps on Chromebooks. What type of impact do you think that's going to have?
I think that'll have a huge impact. I think the thing about Chromebooks is that it's just a web browser, and so we're seeing maybe a bit of a shift in some areas of ed tech that are pushing towards just making everything device agnostic, making it just browser-based. And so I think if you've got school districts that are already going Chromebook instead of iPad or other tablets, and and then you can add Android apps onto the Chromebook. That's only going to be to your advantage.
Question back here.
So I have a question for Tanner. Tanner, you described about geometry and algebra. Now, SalCon, the Khan Foundation, that's how they started actually, teaching their own family members. So have you gone through the videos? Like you say, I wish some developer and a whiskey on wheels, that's what it means. A developer and a whiskey can develop something cool. But this guy has really innovated, and he's went to district level. Do you have a feedback about this?
Jeff, actually, that's his channel. So he'd be the one more capable, I think.
Well, can you tell me again and maybe clarify your question?
Yeah, the question really is, Tanner says we still need more innovative ways in geometry, etc. So I'm just saying, Khan Foundation basically started with that foundation of teaching mathematics. So why do you feel there's still a gap?
Well, I think the way we would look at it is that what Khan Academy has done is really amazing. It's incredible. They created this new paradigm, but it's not the only paradigm for learning. It's just a new tool. The flipped classroom model is a new way, a new tool that teachers can use in their tool belt. But it's not the only one. And I think we're saying that there are other ways to go about it as well.
And I'll add to that too, which is to say we actually give Khan a very high rating. And I think we appreciate the innovation of flipped classroom and that whole notion. He started the entire movement, which is quite amazing. I think what we'd say about Khan is that actually they know they're getting better day by day. And part of what they were hearing was actually critique from some teachers to say, what you're giving me is lecture-based lessons. So my kids are sitting here as, some would say, receptacles, and you're lecturing to them. Now, he's engaging, smart, interesting, so they're pretty good lectures. But that is the critique in the field, which is that Khan really blazed trails in so many ways, but the actual content itself could be more interactive. And that's what they're working on right now. So they are doing so much right now to actually include practice lessons and things where kids are moving things and transforming, triangles. And I think that they would say that will make it a more complete package for them. We've had many talks with them.
Yeah, I would say if you look at how they've really shifted from being primarily about the videos, and now the videos are really more about the support. And their whole missions interface now is the actual sort of this is the vehicle for the learning, and the videos now become the support, the place to go to get help. So you can see that shift.
I think we have 1 more minute left.
So you've been talking mostly about how a teacher would use an application in the classroom environment. Can you speak a little bit to how that might be used as a part of homework? And what percentage of this application use do you envision being on the homework side?
That's good. Anyone want to address?
Well, I think, there are a lot of different situations that students are in. So if a student does have a device at home that they can use, I know we were just talking about flipped classroom, so there are a lot of apps out there that are useful for flipped classroom, or useful not only pre-created content by the developer, or it could also be tools that teachers use to create flipped classroom content. So that's the model where kids at home are learning the content. They're watching a video or they're going through an interactive presentation, and then they come to class the next day, and with the teacher as a guide, they do a lot of activities and more practice in the classroom. So we definitely see that as a huge movement with the devices at home.
Great questions.
So building apps that can improve educational outcomes can help change the world. I hope you all dive into this very important field. Please, a big round of applause for experts here from Common Sense Education. Thank you all for coming.